Well, it's apparent I'm not a pastor or a minister by any measure. Definitely a layman, nothing more. And just a man. Sometimes a poor one. I'm no orator. I can't say I'm a speaker. But I was asked to do this, so I'll do the best I can, hoping not to bore anyone to death. But run through my life. I will say this, if I get emotional, there I go.
That's all right.
Amen.
I'm an old man. It seems the older I get, the more tender I become.
That's right.
So you have to bear with me at times. Some of the memories are not good. I'll start off as a lad. I was born in 1947 in Akron, Ohio. I grew up in a place called the Projects. It was low-cost housing. That's all our family could afford. It was my brother and I. He was 3 years my elder. And in that neighborhood, you had to fight just about every day, it seemed, or you got whipped. So basically, I got whipped pretty much every day. So I learned pretty quick that I had to do something about that. So I always thought it was, you've heard this line, they were the best of times and the worst of times. Most of the time, like I said, I got beaten up. And then one day, like that kid in Christmas Story, something clicked. I said, okay, I'm gonna have to even the scales up here. I gotta do something about this. So I realized I had to do something to be equal to those that hurt me. So I chose the ancient weapons, such as sticks, rocks, and fists. And the tables began to turn in my favor. The terror ended. Now to add to this, I hate to say this, and it's sort of a sore spot with me. My dad didn't like me very well for some reason I've never understood, even till the day of his death. And he always told me that I would never amount to anything, and I would be worthless. So I believed him, as I heard it day in and day out, so I set about to live out his expectation. I was mischievous, I was full of wonder, and I wanted to know how things worked. So I was always taking things apart. If I could find a screwdriver or a wrench or whatever I could find, I'd tear something apart. Well, I'm sure he didn't like that too well, because I never knew how to put them back together. So that was a problem. But I did satisfy some of my curiosity. There were 9 people in our household, 7 kids and mom and dad. We lived in a 3-room house later on, moved from the projects. And we were cramped as all get out, of course. My bed, my brother's bed was in the kitchen next to an old chest freezer. And a lot of times you didn't always get enough to eat. So Dad would go buy these day-old bakery goods, you know, and you'd throw them in that freezer. One night, and nobody was awake, I'd reach over and pull it out and pull out a loaf of bread, and I would eat that. And I don't mean that's just what I like, bread. And I still like it to this day. So that was just the thing I remember. And they were difficult years. We were poor, and being the way we had to dress, it was tough for me at school. I wasn't really accepted anywhere. So I didn't like school. I didn't like the mundane part of the school, the same repetition all the time. I didn't feel challenged at all. I was pretty bored stiff. But I didn't know from one day to the next if I would have a home to come home to. So that's how I thought as a child. Well, then one day, my brother and I, Dave, were in the yard, and this man approached us, and he's just a little guy, sort of balding and very muscular, and he had one eye. I remember that real well, and his name was Pete Hauser. And he said, you boys, you guys go to church anywhere? And we said, no, we're familiar with that. So he said, is it okay if I talk to your parents and see if they'll let you go to Sunday school. I said, sure. So we got Mom, she talked with him, and that began my knowledge of Christ right there with Pete. He was a godly man, and he led Dave and I to Christ. Amen. In his Sunday school class. And that class was always packed. It was just nothing but boys. Because he was a real guys kind of guy. He was a football player in high school and so on and so on. A rough individual. He was a car mechanic. And out of his class of boys came 16 ministers. Wow. That's the kind of guy he was. And I remember he brought an old derelict guy in one day. We came in, this guy, we're looking at him like, well, what's this guy? What's he doing here? And he introduced him to us. And he was from Haven Arrest downtown. That's where they took guys in. They were derelict and so on. And Pete said, now you boys open your Bibles, and anywhere, don't open the same place. You all choose different spots, open your Bible, pick any verse out of any book. So we did. He said, now I'm going to have you tell John the book, the chapter, and the number of the verse. And this man could quote it verbatim. Now this, I thought it was a derelict, some old bum. And we just sat there, our chins almost on the floor like, how could he do that? And even to this day, at my age, I can't do that. So he had this special, I think he said he had a photographic, photogenic mind, and he didn't forget. And how wonderful that is. A good example to us. We never forgot that, as you can tell. Let me see here. I got to catch on some of my notes. Okay, I was a young child when I asked God into my life, and I did it in my way that I was told to do it. And what I thought was correct is I was instructed, but I didn't really understand it. To say, oh yeah, I'm jumping up and down, I'm saved, and I didn't understand it, because I really didn't understand sin, because I wasn't a real terrible sinner, I don't think, even though I was responsible to do so, to find redemption. So I thought, I'm good to go. Someone thought, finally, that I had worth. But I continually, under the Nazarene doctrine, backslid. They kept saying, you can backslide and go to hell. Well, I thought, I sinned last week, so here I am. I'm right up here on my knees, praying, crying out to God, because I knew I was a sinner again. And this was repeated throughout my life, because I could never be good enough to be sinless. My whole life I found I was continually repenting and falling back, always. Crying and confessing, never meeting God's expectation of me. I was told to be baptized, regenerated, and then to seek sanctification or holiness. With confusion and not being able to find this sinless life, I felt lost. It was a struggle all the way through. But I held on anyway. I went to church 3 times a week. You remember, Sunday morning, Sunday night, Wednesday evening. I was always there. And any revival, I was always there. And I was always at the altar, praying. So, I sung in the choir. I cleaned the church. I drove the bus. I was on the church board. I did everything I could do to prove to the Lord that I loved Him. But still, I failed. I heard sermons in this church about right division, but never told the true right division. After high school, my dad and I were at an impasse, and he said to me, he was a former Christian, he was a former Nazarene, but he had some kind of thing, he held against somebody, and so he sort of bailed out. But he did say, the men that preached the gospel, he admired. So I thought, he has such admiration, what can I do to change his attitude about me? Well, I know, I'll go to Bible school. So I got into Bible school. I was in there 2 years. I thought I could please him and find acceptance of him. That failed. It wasn't what I felt I should be doing. So I left Bible school. Well, that was in 1967. Well, then my life does some extreme changing. I'm a young man, 19 years old. And you know how you are as a teenager, you get a little rebellious and whatever, you do whatever comes your way. So I realized the Vietnam War was going on, and I was to be drafted, I was sure, because I was 1A. So what I do, I go down and enlist. So I thought, I'm going to get ahead of this curve, and I'm going to enlist, and I'll be able to choose my direction, not Uncle Sam choosing it for me. That's not a good thing. So I did so. And I wanted to find something I was suited for. Little did I know I would end up in the jungles of Vietnam. I thought I thought, well, perhaps my orders will be cut for Germany. But I found out maybe 1 or 2 guys out of a whole company might go to Germany, might. And that was very slim. So basically all of us guys going at that time, Vietnam was really cranking up heavy, and so we knew where we were going. We were going straight to combat. Basic training, I went through Fort Knox. It was an armor school, but I wasn't in armor, but that's where I trained. Did all of our training through machine gun schools and rifles and different types of weapons. And then I went to a place called Fort Rucker, Alabama, which is the U.S. Army Helicopter School. And that's what I had enlisted for, to be a helicopter crew chief, mechanic, and door gunner. So my MOS, which is I forget exactly what MOS stands for, but what is a number they give you, and it's the number they understand, civilians, and I didn't even understand at the time, apparently still don't, was 67N20, helicopter mechanic, crew chief, door gunner. So I was excited, but scared. It's like going to kindergarten the first time. You know you got to go, but boy, am I ready. I don't know what to expect, what's going to happen there. And that's how you look at this. So I'll give you some stories when I was there. We left here at Akron-Canton Airport on a cold, wintry January day. We flew to Fort Dix, New Jersey. That was a staging area. We stayed there for 2 to 3 days while they're cutting our orders for Nam. They supplied us some things that we'll use overseas, and then they set us on a plane and we landed in Anchorage, Alaska. Beautiful place, as long as I got to see it, about 3 hours. And we refueled and took off from there, and the next place we landed was Yokosuka, Japan. We blew some tires when we landed, so we had a layover. So I got to see a little bit of Japan, not much. You weren't allowed to go ferrying off too far. You want to stay close, you don't want to miss that plane. So the next thing you know, we're on the plane, and we're headed straight into the South China Sea area. And not familiar with that geography at all. I mean, it was all new to me. And it was about 2:30 in the morning, and we're coming in toward the land. And there was a grunt sitting next to me. That's a GI. We always called them grunts. They were ground pounders, or soldiers that fought on the ground. And he had already been to Vietnam because I saw his combat patch. So I'm talking with him. He wasn't real talkative, though. And I noticed before we were talking and joking around and laughing and sort of jovial. The closer we got and we saw the coastline barely, you could just see the shadow of it along the South China Sea there. Got so quiet in that airplane. You wouldn't hear a pin drop in there. I mean, quiet, because we realized the immensity of what we were about to face. And even the guys that were seasoned vets were very quiet, because we knew we were up against it. And as we're coming in and we're making a hard left turn, I'm looking out the window, and I see all these fires burning across the land. And I said to this grunt, I said, what are all those fires? They're everywhere, as far as I can see. He said, those aren't fires, those are naval aerial flares. I said, well, what are those for? He said, well, they shoot them, either drop them out of helicopters or they fire them out of cannons and so on, to line up the area where they're being attacked so they can see the enemy. So that really didn't help me out much. That sort of unnerved me a little bit, thinking there must be a lot of enemy contact going on for there to be that many places in Nam that were so well lit. So when you do land, I land in Cam Ranh Bay. I remember when the door opened, okay, and I just came from 10 below zero. 24 hours later, I'm in Vietnam at Cam Ranh Bay, getting off this plane. When you opened the door, it was like a wall of something hit us. It actually moved you. It was the extreme heat and humidity. And the smell was just overpowering. I never smelled anything like that before, and I was trying to figure out what it was. And basically, as you go through Nam and you learn all the different things going on, you find out what it is. They take the human waste and they burn it. They put jet fuel on it and they burn it. And that's burning all over Vietnam, and that smell just sort of hangs in the air. And plus the rotting vegetation from the jungle and so on. When you get there, I flew on a C-130 to a place called Chu Lai. It was in I Corps. And what you do, you go through a school there for 2 weeks. It's called orientation and acclimation. So what you would do, you go through booby trap school. You have some jungle survival, but not enough to survive. You fill sandbags all day. They want you out in that heat. They want you to understand what you're going to face. And it's hard to really breathe. You sort of breathe in gulps when you're first there because you're not used to that kind of thing. And eventually you start to acclimate. Just so slowly you get used to it. And then you're filling sandbags all day and building bunkers. Then they sent me to my company. They put me on all of us on these Army buses, and they had this, looked like chicken wire on all the windows, you know. It was wrapped in this stuff. And I said, what is this? Dumb question. Hey, what's that chicken wire on all these windows? He said, well, it's so the enemy, if he throws hand grenades or whatever, it won't get in the bus, it'll bounce off. So you might be aware of some of that, Chuck. So they sent me to my company. It was called the 176th Assault Helicopter Company in Chu Lai, Republic of Vietnam. It was the 14th Combat Aviation Battalion. I was in a place called I Corps, or the Central Highlands. That was up north. And there were 4 corps in Vietnam. You had I Corps, which actually was 1 corps, but we all called it I Corps for the ease of it. Then 2 corps, 3 corps, 4 corps down in the Delta. So I was in the more closer to Hanoi than the other 3 corps. Okay, my area of operation was the city of Hue. I can give you a little idea about this. I don't know how well you'll be able to see this, but I'll give you an idea. This would be the South China Sea. Okay, now right up here is Hue. It looks like Hue, H-U-E, but it's pronounced Hue by the Vietnamese. We flew into Hue, we flew into Quang Tri, and I flew very close to DMZ, and this is where the North Vietnamese were in Hanoi, where our men were held captive, right here in Hanoi. So we never got into this area. That's where the fighters went in, mostly fighter bombers and bombers, B-52s and so on. Okay, right down from Hue, I flew into this almost every day. That was Da Nang. I flew in there. There was a big air base there. We would fuel up there, we would rearm there, and so on. Out here was a place we called Indian Territory, or the Boondocks. It was Ashaw Valley. Now, a lot of people are aware of Ashaw Valley, have heard of it. And that's where Hamburger Hill was fought when we were there, 1969, May. A lot of men died trying to take that hill. And then the thing that really, really burned us up, after all that death and maiming and loss of treasure and helicopters and ammunition expended, we withdrew from the hill, and the enemy took it again. And that happened over and over and over. So we'd sit down at flight operations and say, what are we trying to do here? If we take real estate, let's keep the real estate. Amen. But no, they give it up. So we knew the bean counters back here, shoving the beans around the table, were doing all the calls on us, and we're at their mercy, and we paid the price. Okay, now, right here, you've heard about the situation that happened in this place. This is where I stationed, Chu Lai, 70 air miles south of Da Nang. Right below us, and a little further inland, was a place called My Lai, where the My Lai massacre took place. I flew in there. My gunner was shot there at My Lai. We landed there. It was supposed to be a quiet place that day, and he was shot to death. Right down here was our sister company, 174th. We were the Minutemen and muskets. That was your slicks and your gunships. And in Duc Pho was the 174th, and that was the Sharks and Dolphins. We flew together on a lot of combat missions. We had a few Cobras in our company, had a few, and I'll tell you about some of the missions. As far as I usually went south was a place called Quy Nhon. And this, I hate to say it, but it had the highest venereal disease rate in Vietnam of any city. I don't need to tell you any more than that. Okay, I flew many a time missions over into this area. It covered up, clear up into here to, about down in here, and that was, we called it Laos, and some call it Laos. And then the other area we flew into doing recon was Cambodia. Now, when you flew in those areas, they said, we don't know you. It was voluntary, but I never volunteered. So whatever was on the flight schedule, we would fly recon. You were not allowed to fire on the enemy. They would fire on you, though, but you dare not return fire. So you're just there to observe and gather information and then bring it back to the people there to tell the troops what's going on. Now, and also one important thing. You won't be able to see it. I didn't have the right marker. You guys ever hear of the Ho Chi Minh Trail? Okay. It starts up in here in North Vietnam. Right in here is China. There's a big buffer zone that goes around this area up here. Why? Because they're both communists, I don't know. But it starts up in here. This is where they start the Ho Chi Minh Trail, basically. They would come down and it would empty out here close to Quang Tri. It kept going down and it emptied out into the mountains right from Da Nang. Continues down and it emptied right where I was stationed, right here at Chu Lai, and then on down between My Lai and Duc Pho. Then it came on down to 3 Corps, down this area above Cam Ranh Bay and close to Quy Nhon. And then, of course, it dumped down here into the Delta in Corps 4. And I flew over that one time. We were doing recon, and I looked down, and thank the Lord, we were flying at least 2,500 feet that day, trying to gather information. And I looked down and I said, what are all those tanks and those great big trucks, and there's soldiers everywhere, and missiles and junk, all kind of junk down there. And the pilot says, well, that's Ho Chi Minh Trail. And I just got chills, you know. I said, man, you know, it was just like ants. They were everywhere. And this was an asphalt road. Cut in the jungle.
There's not a thing you can do about it.
No, and he says, hey, Norm, why don't you throw a few rounds down there? I said, there's no way I'm throwing any rounds. I said, if you did, they wouldn't pay any attention to you. They're not going to waste anything on us. They have a better mission to take care of. But I wouldn't, there's no way I did that. I was too afraid to. But just give you an idea what we were doing. Okay, so I had a large area to fly and cover. And we were a scramble outfit. We run call 24 hours. We were day and night. I really didn't like the night missions because it's hard to find the guys where they were, and all we flew was coordinates. We had no other ways to find them, no ADF, nothing that pilots are aware of, no beam to fly, nothing. So we're out there blind trying to find them in the dark. We had to fly dark ourselves, otherwise they would be able to home in on you. And they always had a 51 laying around somewhere, which would take you down without any problem at all. So we flew all hours of day and night. Oh, and I will tell you this one thing. I've got a little ahead of myself. When I first was there, this guy came in this tent, and me and another kid, we went to the same school, we were friends, Lynn Brown. We're sitting in this tent in the company area, we're brand new there, and he said, this sergeant's coming in, he's going to orientate you guys about the company area. I said, okay. So we're sitting there just talking. In walks this guy. He's muddy. He has not a beard like you fellas. He's got stubble. He's dirty. He has dried blood all over him. He's got an M60 machine gun on his shoulder. His helmet's cocked and strap hanging down. And I'll never forget what this guy said. He's telling us certain things, and he was a flight crew chief. He says, at the end of his talk, he said to me and Brown, in the next 2 weeks, you will kill your first man. Well, my heart just sunk to the bottom of my stomach. I felt nauseous. Because I thought, I didn't come here to do that. What is this? And I was sort of in shock, and Brown, his eyes were this big too. Like, what? And the guy just walks out. Oh, and he had that cigar in his teeth. And it left a real impression on us. So I got up from there, and I went to see the old man. And I said, is your mission, sir, may I speak? He said, go ahead. I said, I know I'm a flight crew chief, but I'd like to opt for higher echelon maintenance and be a hangar crew chief where I can do higher maintenance on the helicopters that get shot up and stuff. He goes, well, let me look at your record here. He goes, well, you're a flight crew chief, son. You've already got your wings. He said, get your butt out of my tent. Get on that helicopter. Yes, sir. So that was that. And I was scared out of my wits. But what was nice, I had a pilot, Dave and Chasen. You had two guys. You had your AC and you had your co-pilot. And I had a door gunner and me. So here they come. They go, hey, Norm. I said, yeah, what? And you didn't have to suit these guys. They were warrant officers, and you were supposed to, but they said, hey, we're a team. You don't salute us. We're Woojie Bears. That's what we call them, Woojie Bears, warrant officers. And they were good boys. They were just like us. And he says, you drew the right straw, Norm. I said, how did I draw it? I don't know anything about this. He said, well, you're going to fly dignitaries, reporters, cameramen, and brass, and you're going to fly feet wet for 2 weeks. Well, that don't mean anything to me. So as I'm going along, I'm finding out. We're heavily loaded with ammo and our guns and everything. We fly, how you would do it, you go fly from Chu Lai, and you go out over the South China Sea, and you would turn and follow the coast. That's feet wet. In other words, you go down, you're going to get wet. So you're flying along the water, then you go inland to pick them up, back out, fly feet wet to the place you're taking them, come inland, drop them off, go back. So all those 2 weeks, I think one time we got shot at. So after the second week, I thought, well, hey, I can do this. This is gravy job. I was sweating nothing here. I'm going to be fine. Well, then comes Monday morning. We always took off in the dark. We always landed in the dark. We were flying all day long, sometimes 14, 16 hours a day. And we just land different places, refuel, rearm. We had these places all over now where we could do that. So here comes the AC, or the pilot, the main pilot, aircraft commander. He says, well, today is your day, Normie. And I said, what's that? He said, we're going to the Ashaw Valley. And of course, not knowing anything about Ashaw Valley, I said, oh, is that good or bad? He goes, it ain't good. And of course, we got shot up pretty bad. So that was my day. I never forgot that one. Then I'll tell you about a couple of battles. We came to LZ Bayonet. It was not far from Chu Lai in our base. And we landed there to see. We saw stuff on the pad, so we landed. And talking to them, say, hey, you guys need to get this stuff out to the field units. It was a bunch of ammunition in crates, water, and some CRADs. And they said, yeah, could you do that for us? Yeah, we'll take it, throw it on. So we're throwing it on there. And this guy came up to me, he's a captain. He's called an S3 Air. He was a logistics officer, and he was responsible to know where troops were, when and how, what they needed, and so on. So he says, hey, this is the last flight out of my area here. How about I go with you? Because I know right where they are. You guys don't have to look for them. So he said, hey, hop in here. So he hops in right next to me. And you got, in a Huey, you're sort of packed in there. So he's right against me. There's nowhere for me to go. And I use what they call a free gun. The old gun you started out was a butterfly gun, 2 handles, twin triggers, and it's mounted. It only goes so high, so you don't shoot your rotor blades off and so low. And that's no joke. They've shot the rotor blades off with free guns. So they have those fixed. You only shoot so far to the back. You don't want to shoot your tail rotor off. And so far this way, you don't want to hit a pilot. So you get used to your field of fire and your limitations. You try to stay within those. Then they turn you with a free gun. It's almost like a rifle, except it's a machine gun. It fires a 7.62. I have a couple rounds here so you can see them. High rate of fire, 550, 600 rounds a minute. I had my gun, I had 3,000 rounds between my legs, and my gunner had the same. It was to cover our people on board, cover our chopper, cover ourselves. So anyway, this boy, he gets on, he's telling us, okay, do so-and-so, and we listened to every conversation. We had different radios, and I could click off or on right above my head here. And I could listen, and I had a hot mic all the time, so I could interrupt at any time, especially in the firefight. And when you're standing out on the skid, I want to know if you're going to make a hard right turn, because I don't want to be kicked into the air and out of the helicopter. So he would let me know, Norm, hard right, so I would brace let him tilt it up so he didn't kick me up off the skid. But you get used to doing those things. I didn't have any safety harness on or anything, just you get so used to doing it that it's just commonplace. So anyway, we were going out there, and we got to the area. It was south of Ashaw. It was in a bad area. I think it was Huion. And we're talking to ground, and that's the guys on the ground, the grunts. And we said, what do you have, fellas? And they said, well, we have several wounded, we have several dead, and we need resupplied bad. We said, well, what contact have you had, and when? What type? They said, well, light to medium weapons, and about 2 hours ago. I said, all right, we're going to come in, we're going to make a left turn, we're going to come in and we're going to place our nose toward the South China Sea, and we're going to land on that Rice Paddy dike, right about where you are right now. We're going to land on that dike. Is that okay? That's fine. So here they are trudging through this filthy water. Now it was up at least to their waist. And I don't know if you guys don't probably know, but the Vietnamese, they have a lot of their little huts on stilts, and their body waste goes right into those rice paddies. That's almost like a fertilizer. So I don't want to get too carried away here. Anyway, make a long story short, everything was looking pretty good. We're not taking any fire. I think we're going to be okay. And
Were you safe when all this was happening to you?
yeah, as a kid. Okay, but I'll tell you, I did write a verse. It's worn off my helmet, but there was a verse on here, Jeremiah 1:19. If you ever want to look that up. And that I adopted, even though it was to the Jews and not to me, but it helped sustain me. And they shall fight against thee, but they shall not prevail against thee. For I am with thee, saith the Lord, Amen, to deliver thee. Amen. And I adopted that. That kept me. So anyway, we're landing, and I don't know if you know anything about helicopters. When you're already overloaded, there's a lot of things. I know Mike would be aware of this. Temperature plays into your power, humidity, the density of the air, all those things play into it. Sometimes, even under a load, when I go into transition, that's when you get to a certain point, the length of your rotor blades is where you start in heavy transition. And basically, once you start that, you cannot pull up. Everybody thinks, oh, hover, hover. You can't. Once you start that, you're committed. So here we are, starting it, just beginning it, and all hell broke loose. There were purple tracer rounds and orange. I forget all the green coming from every direction, so I knew it wasn't our guys. And they're just riddling my chopper. They're just riddling it. And I said, get it up, get it up. I'm yelling to pull power, all you can. He's trying to pull power, but we weren't able to wring enough power, and I'm afraid we're going to go ahead and crash. And we're taking hits. They hit my ammo box between my legs. They shot this pole right here beside me, just shot that off, and my hand grenades fell on the floor. The S3 Air took a round for me. I'm gunning to hold them down. A round came through and hit him right here, took his jaw off and his nose, and he lost an eye. And the pilot got hit in the left hand where he was doing the collective. And I know what, then I hit our axial compression stage, because it's a turbine, like a jet engine. And now we go into a compressor stall. And you hear this boom, boom, boom. I look back and we're on fire. So I know we're going down. I know our power. I'm watching the N1 and N2 start to ring down. And I prayed. It's time to get down on your knees. It's time to plead. Dear Lord, please help us. There was nowhere to go. Right here, triple canopy jungle. We couldn't turn, couldn't do anything. So we had to go for that jungle. And I learned in school where all my fuel tanks are, underneath, in the belly. Those trees will just rake your fuel tanks, and they will burst, and you're going to die a horrible death. And so I thought, well, this is it. And I'm just telling you as well as I'm standing here. I don't know how, I don't understand it. But as we're going down, and it's raking our belly, we're not in the trees yet, but it's really giving us a workover. A place opened up, and we were just able to crash in a rice paddy. We all survived. Then we start working on these guys, and these NVA were coming down the side of this mountain, and they were firing down on us. We had a Mayday radio. We got on and said, Mayday, Mayday, and we gave them the grid coordinates. Nobody was available to help us. There was no troops close. So we were in a real fix. My job was to get the decipher radios out of avionics, to pull the filters out of the fuel tank, pull the butterfly cap, and pull that filter out, and take a hand grenade, throw it in the fuel tank. If it came to that point, I was to destroy the chopper and destroy the deciphered radios. So we set up a perimeter with the 60s, and we're trying to fight back, but we're not doing real good. And trying to help these guys too, we had our hands full. And somebody came over there and says, we're on our way. We were Winchester, but now, which means they were out of ammo. And I could hear the beat of their wings coming. Anybody who's been in Vietnam is real familiar with the beat of the Huey's wings, or a Cobra. And so I knew what it was, Cobras. And he said, we just refueled, we topped off, and we just topped off ammo, we're coming. And I looked up in the air to the south, and here they were coming, side by side. And as they went over, they did this, you know. And underneath, they had, looked like Casper the Ghost on the bottom. It said Blue Ghost on the bottom of both of them. And we're going right there, and they went over there, boy, and they emptied minigun on them, 40 Mike and 2.75 rockets, and they just stopped them dead where they were. Now we got things under control pretty much, and we got a medevac in there then. We got these boys airlifted out. They both survived. Of course, the hand wound, it was very survivable. The other guy, they took to Japan and reconstructed his face and so on. I heard he's doing well, thankfully. Long-range patrol came in and got us and took us back to an old French fort by foot called Tin Phuc on the Trebong River, and we waited there until another helicopter come in and get us. They took us out, took us back to Chu Lai. Chinook came in and airlifted our chopper out, put me on the helicopter, sent me right back to Ashaw that day, and I was shaking in my boots. Okay, well, that's enough of that. We can go on and on there. So anyway, after making it through combat with God's help, and there were many, many close times, I shouldn't even be standing here in reality. It's too many close calls. Got shot down twice, once in Ashaw, once in Duc Pho. That's that same place I was showing you. Here's Ashaw, and Duc Pho's down here. It's called Suicide Pass. We got shot down there. And I had a feeling I was going to die the one day, and it came awful close. But we did make it back, and I'm grateful. And then I decided, what should I do? I'm back home. I got served my time, my 3 years, got out. What can I do that's not destructive and deadly? What can I do? So I decided, what about being a firefighter? So I tested out in Akron, I tested out in Canton, and I did real well, made it. This, by the way, is my flight helmet that I used. I'll show you that real quick. This doesn't protect you just for the bright sun. It's just a shield for sun. I put this, I flew stateside quite a bit with guys on choppers, so checked my mic out, it still works. That's surprising. This thing's 52, 53 years old. I was in second flight, it was called Snoopy, so when I went to guns, I did fly with guns, I got voted in toward the end of my tour, so I had him put this wolf on here, and had Snoopy gone mad. So you don't land with a gunship, you just fire support only. You roll in and take the enemy out. Use 2.75 folding fin rockets, twin miniguns, 6,000 rounds per gun a minute, plus 2-door guns and a thump gun, 40 Mike, which is not that big around, exploding head. You're aware of a thump gun. M79 they call them. So this went on many times, different battles, different places. It was just a terrible place, even though it was a very beautiful place. So I became this fireman. I think I'm running out of time. I worked at Goodyear Aerospace for 6 years. And it was okay, but I wasn't happy there. So, like I said, I tested out as a firefighter medic for the city of Canton. I can give you some stories, but I don't want to get anybody too shook up, but I can give you a couple. Well, one fire we had I remember very well, it scared me half out of my wits, was the Sugardale fire. We're in the middle of the night, a hard winter night, cold and windy. I was on a tower. My job is usually rescue, and I drove the tower a lot. I drove all the trucks, every engine, every medic unit, every tower. I knew them inside out. I floated station to station for 10 years. So I knew all their, idiosyncrasies, what they would do and what they wouldn't do. So they liked me floating around because I knew what was going on. So we get this fire, we go rolling there, say like 8 o'clock in the evening. It was dark and just freezing cold. I'm riding mask, have a mask partner. And we get in there and see what's going on. The guys were cutting ducting out of the inside the plant. They were using cutting torches of all things in a meat packing plant. So all that grease is in those ductworks and all that dust and everything, and it took off. So we got the call. Well, by the time we got there, this thing was extending all through the building. I mean, it was just in a rage. So our chief was asking the company to shut down their ammonia pumps, because that's what they use for their coolants, for their freezers and coolers and so on. Well, they refused to do it. So me and the other guy, we're looking for people who are supposed to be in the lowest bowels of this place. I don't know if you've ever been in one of these big buildings, but they're like catacombs. And the way we were trained, if you're always looking for egress, you guys remember this too. If you're ever in a place you're not familiar with, remember this. You get in a fire, always follow the walls. It'll take you to a point of egress, sooner or later. Don't change up. Once you start going away, unless you really run into something that's odd, where you have to, you'll eventually hit a window, a door, or something. That's how we always got out of places when we got in a real pinch. And here, you count your steps. Well, we didn't have a lifeline. Usually you take a lifeline in this case, because we're going after people, you gotta get to them quick, and we gotta find egress. So you go through this door, and you're trying to count your steps, and then you go find another door. You go through that door. So you say, okay, I went 10 steps here, I went left, opened this door, I went 20 steps, and I made a right, opened that door. And, okay, now after you've opened so many doors, you go, crap, what did I do? You know, which way did I go? Now, you get in there now, you have about 40 minutes of air in your tank. And the old mask helped me out a lot, the old Scott Air Pack. You had a regulator down here at your waist, and I would take my mask hose, like it looked like a fighter pilot's kind of deal, and you'd hook that in there and tighten it up, and then I would have my valves and everything right here. And there was a bell, and it would ring when it was getting low. Well, if I ran out of air, I could disconnect it, shove it into my coat, and I'd have another 2 to 3 minutes of air. Well, with the new mask, they clip on right here. And they're pressure demand masks, so there's no way you can do that. Once you're out, you're out. And you better be measuring your breaths. And many a time I had to slow down, get a hold of myself and say, okay, don't panic, don't panic. Measure your breaths, measure them. Take a deep one and look like crazy for a way out. And many times we got cut off. They couldn't find us, we couldn't find them. And that was the case of Sugar Dell. We got down in there, can't find our way out. It's pitch black in there. Just imagine that. You have, it's dark at night, you put your hands over your eyes, and tell me what you see.
Nothing.
And that's what you see in a fire. It ain't like on TV. In a working fire like that, of a heavy fire load, and dangerous chemicals are burning called ammonia. This ain't Bo Peep. This is 100% ammonia. It's dangerous stuff, and it's explosive. So now we're crawling around our floor in this big machine room, trying to find a way of getting out of there. And our masks start going. That means you got 3 to 5 minutes to get out. So now you go onto your own reserve. You start breathing, like I say, measured breaths, making it last as long as you can. And the funny part was, you could see now and then streaks of blue going through this smoke. You could almost cut your hunk out with a knife. You dare not pull your mask off, you're going to die. So you're crawling around, and finally, we ran into a hose. It was on the floor. One of the fire crews, one of the engine boys, was down there fighting the fire. We found that hose, so we grabbed a hold of it, and he started following that. That's the other thing you're always looking for, is a hose line. So we found that, and we're going through this door and that door, and we found the guys on the nozzle. That wasn't helping us. I said, crap, we're going the wrong way. So I said, and they could hear our things going off, and they said, man, you guys gotta get out of here, you know? So we turn around, we follow the line, we finally did get out. But when we got out, and when you're in all that and you're pumping all that adrenaline, you came out, and those old masks we had the old fire helmets, the old rubber coats, your boots only came up to here. It's not like the modern fire gear in those days. And we had blisters like this hanging down full of water from ammonia burns. Your ears were blistered and full of water. Your wrists were the same. Well, we were hot, but when we got outside, you're so soaked with water and ammonia that that cold air hit and you start getting cold real quick. So a medic unit's sitting there. Well, me and Dale Brown, a couple other guys, we were on masks, so we jump in the medic unit, you know, rip our face piece off. We disconnected the other parts, so we ripped it off and climbed that medic unit. And man, we come bailing out of there because you couldn't breathe for the ammonia. You had so much ammonia soaked in all your fire gear, you smell like a cotton picking ammonia bottle. You know, it was bad. Now that was one of the bad ones, and we had some firemen that went down in that fire and had to be taken out with help, and a lot of those guys retired due to that. We've run on every kind of incident. Some I would not care to tell you about. It's too gruesome, too ugly. You never believe what man does to man, to children, to their wives, to their girlfriends, to the enemy, gangs. I mean, we go on and on here. We get threatened too. And we say, we're not. They say, we didn't call for no police. I said, we're not police. We're firemen. Well, we didn't call for no firemen either. I said, okay, good day. But that's the kind of stuff you run into. It's, in some cases they love you, and in some other cases they don't like you at all. So you deal with every kind of person, every kind of nature you would ever expect, and some you don't expect. I got put in the hospital one time. Well, several times I had to go in for injury, but one time I had a fire at AEP, you know what American Electric Power is. They had a transformer that was taking power from the Tennessee Valley Authority. We got the call, we got over there. I was on the ladder truck, me and a young fella, Charles. And we're looking for people, supposedly are stuck in the building in the lower level. When we pull up in front of AEP on Cleveland Avenue, you can't see the building for the smoke. When I got off the ladder truck, I couldn't see the ground. Next thing you know, I can't even see the truck. There was so much smoke coming out of a street grading, and in the sidewalk, it was just blowing out like a jet engine. And this ground was shaking like this. You felt like you're in an earthquake, and it's going, I mean, it's roaring, and this transformer is blown. And it was very, very high kV, high voltage. So we go in there, and here again, no hand line, no safety line, dumb. And we go down in the bowels of this thing, and we found the vault, and they're bringing lines in, fighting this thing, and we're trying to find any people down there. Well, nobody told us they had already gotten them out. So we're down there trying to find them without any communication, because in those days you didn't have the FM radios, and they won't work below grade. So your communication is lost. So that's why later they went to FM and so on. We'll go through concrete and so on. But here we are, and we ran out of air. And here again, we're trying to find our way out. And when we finally did, we can't breathe. We took in too much PVC and PBB, and those things are vital. They'll just beat you down. I'm surprised we even lived. So when we finally hit outside, and it's still in the same smoke, out of air. We're down on our knees, taking everything else because we're gasping, trying to get even one breath of air, and we can't. So they threw us in the medic unit, rushed us to TM. We were there a few days, trying to, they overloaded us with IVs and high oxygen, trying to clean our system and our kidneys and our livers out. Some guys got injured pretty bad over that. One of the captains, he was in there for a long time. So that's pretty much it. I mean, I could go on there, but I won't. I'll tell you one little thing that happened. You might get a kick out of our former chief, when I got on the job and he was retiring. His name was Chief Waddell. And he talked like Elmer Fudd. I mean, it doesn't have anything to do with his intellect. This guy was really smart, but he had this impediment, and it made you chuckle inside. You didn't want to do it. I mean, you don't want to do it in front of him and make him mad at you. But he was a fireman's fireman. This guy, he loved you. He led you. He was a good man. Well, one day we're all sitting out front of the fire station eating. We just got through eating, and we're all sitting out on these benches. And we have 8 blue shirts and one guy with a white shirt. Who was that? Chief Waddell. He's sitting amongst us, see, and we're laughing, and we're talking. All of a sudden, this semi comes up, and he hits the airlock, you know, and yeah, he locks the thing up, and he gets out, and he comes over. He walks right up. Who's he going to walk up to?
White shirt.
Going to walk right up to that white shirt. And that was Waddell. And he goes, "Tay, can you tell me how to get to 35th and Cleveland?" And Waddell looks over to the fireman next to me. He goes, "You better tell him. He'll never believe me." Because he knew he was going to get a butt whipping if he told him, and he thought maybe he was making fun of him, but he wasn't. That's how he talked. Okay, so much for that. But it was just a few things. I could go on here. I think my time is at its end. Not days, but I'm trying to cover a lot of territory quick. Oh, this is the fire helmet. This is the result of a flashover. This shield is normally clear and not all folded up. We're in a flashover, and you got to get out within seconds, or you're not going to make it. It's pretty.
Norm, you can honestly say you've walked through hell.
Well, not literal hell, but it sure scared the willies out of me. My mask straps melted off. My face mask was waffling. My gloves were on fire. My coat turned from black to pink. That tells you we're in extreme heat. My boots were melting. The straps that held my air tank on melted, and my air tank hit the floor, and I dragged it out with me. We stayed in too long. So there's all kinds of things you're trained for, and you have to keep training and training and training, because you never know. It's never the same. It's always different and changing up. But I can say through it all, having met Mr. Stewart and others here, Linda, Clarence, and our former pastor, Todd, I didn't understand the right division. But through their help and through the books and reading the letters of Paul, I had a battle, and I still sometimes do, thinking, am I joining a cult, or is this true? So I had to keep reading, and finally, it hit me. This is it. This is it. And it's eternal weight of glory. Thank you.